Hey, deserving listeners, this is chapter 4 in our deep dive on neo-Nazis. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I design the little toothpicks that you find in restaurants.
So I thought we would start the introduction to chapter 4 with discussing the Buffalo shooting that happened last year in 2022. We're recording this in the end of 2023. As always, trigger warning because it doesn't go into graphic detail and we're not going to describe it in graphic detail, but it's a very, very tough subject. I have learned the limits for myself when I was doing the deep dive that there's only so much of this that I can cram into my head at one time, so take care of yourself. So in 2022, there was a shooting at a supermarket in Buffalo, and 10 people, all of whom were black, were murdered and 3 were injured. The shooter was a 18 years old white male. I won't mention his name because that's often why they do this sort of thing. He live streamed the attack on Twitch for a number of minutes before Twitch figured it out and took it down. His manifesto talked about ethno-nationalism, white supremacy, and the Great Replacement conspiracy theory and white genocide, which we'll get into. Shortly afterwards, New York banned most semi-automatic sales to people under 21 and certain types of body armor. Woohoo!
Definitely should do that. That's the minimum.
Yeah, it's like most semi-automatic sales are banned to people under 21 and just certain types of body armor. So, all right. And the shooter was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. And the reason why we're talking about it is because there's strong evidence that the shooter was radicalized by online neo-Nazi rhetoric. So let's watch a news clip on Vice.
But what's often been missing from the discussion around this shooting is how it neatly fits into a pattern of white supremacist terror attacks directly inspired by the Christchurch mosque massacres of 2019. This is how racist conspiracy theory and emerging tech platforms have combined to create the template for a chilling new form of gamified, live-streamed far-right terror.
Yeah, so without going into detail, and we might not have time to, there's a chilling trend of copycat shooters who will either target black people or Jewish people. And what he's talking about is the shooting in Buffalo, the 18-year-old white male who shot a bunch of black people in Buffalo, New York, was seemingly following in the footsteps directly from previous shootings that were similar.
And this morning, we're getting an exclusive look at the moment the shooter was arrested and the warning signs that were missed.
Investigators are going to be pouring through multiple online posts that this alleged shooter made.
Before his attack, the Buffalo shooter released a manifesto on Discord, largely centered around a conspiracy theory known as the Great Replacement.
So we'll watch more of this, but there seems to be a trend that Discord is where neo-Nazis get together. Did you know that?
Let me put it this way. It's where a lot of communities get together, and also a lot of video game communities. And there's a lot of video games that, young people play that those young people might then become radicalized and continue being on Discord.
Yeah.
And it's a good place to find those young people that are...
Right. Yeah, it just seems like it's a gamer place. And of course, other community. We used to have a Discord server ourselves. Yeah. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting.
In other words, it's not like there's 3 main Discord-like services, and we're wondering, why are they choosing Discord? It's more like Discord is the service you would use for a group and a community.
Yeah. Well, there's Slack, which is very similar.
But Slack is more used by teams working together. I mean, I think Discord grew in the idea of like, hey, create your community.
Oh, okay.
So you're going to create a community. Okay. It just happens to be a racist white nationalist community.
In May 2022, a domestic terrorist murdered 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York.
The alleged shooter wearing full body armor and tactical gear, targeting people of color.
This is an absolute racist hate crime.
They're reviewing a 180-page manifesto reportedly written by the shooter, where he describes his perceptions about the dwindling size of the white population.
The attack was followed by the depressingly familiar round of platitudes about thoughts and prayers, as well as the usual series of arguments and evasions around gun control in America.
Yeah, it is so tragic that you would have access to military-grade equipment so easily that you can go and, because the fact is 350 million people, there's going to be people that lose their marbles and that want to go and kill themselves or do harm. Absolutely. It's going to happen. If it's not white power, it's something else.
And to be clear, by lose your marbles, you're including people who are indoctrinated into a Discord cult of racism. You're not talking about mental health.
Well, I'm definitely including mental health. Like, of course. Yeah.
But typically, the shooters are not suffering from a mental health condition that would cause the shooting of a bunch of people.
You and I have disagreed about this in the past. Like, I'm not saying they've been diagnosed or would be diagnosed. I'm just saying you have a curve, Pareto curve. People land in like the normal side, and day to day they don't go out and shoot people. Some people fall off that curve. Whatever you want to call that happened to that person. And I'm saying that's going to happen in a big society.
Okay.
But when it happens, and the thing that you can do is, heck, grab a car, which is horrific enough. There's still some natural limits to what you can do, or grab a knife and things like that. When you can grab full body armor and a weapon of mass killing and walk anywhere, it's just the casualties and the hurt is going to be exponentially greater.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I push back on words like, I can't remember what you said,
lose their marbles,
is because there's a right-wing rhetoric talking point that, in any population, you're going to have some crazy people suffering from schizophrenia, delusions, and this sort of thing. And occasionally individuals with schizophrenia or psychosis will commit a crime like this, but the vast majority of people who murder people and even mass shootings are not suffering from those disorders. And even if they were, that wasn't the cause necessarily, because when you look at statistics, the vast majority of people who suffer from psychosis, what we would call, losing one's marbles or going crazy or whatever, then we see that there's barely an increase in risk of that kind of behavior or criminal behavior in general. But also when we have resources for those individuals that help them, that are humane and available and suited to the individual, then that signal goes away. Meaning that the frustration of untreated disorders and the ostracization and your life going down the tubes, losing your job, losing your support system, losing your house, can result in some people becoming desperate to take actions of crime, or just so in despair that they've given up hope. And so we definitely want to disassociate these kinds of crimes with going crazy or with a mental disorder. The vast majority of people who commit these crimes, it's not because they have some sort of mental condition that we have available to us in the DSM. You yourself can label them as there's something different about them, I suppose, but there's not science to back that up.
Well, let me flip the script though, because if our belief is that, which is, I know is not what you're saying. If our belief was that, like, look, there's really nothing we can do to help these people ahead of time, then we would be in a really worse situation. Whereas I believe, and I think you believe, that absolutely early intervention with these individuals could help them. And whatever that intervention is meant to do, whatever label you want to give to the thing that was in their head, because it was in their head, that the intervention could help, let's call that a candy apple. They had candy apple.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that, so my point was simply that there are folk with candy apple, and when you can identify it early and maybe intervene, maybe you can help them. But if you can't, and they have access to mass destruction weapons, then it's going to be worse for everyone.
Well, the phrase I would put to it is that these individuals are suicidal and angry. Those are words we have available to us.
Yeah.
And they often are suicidal and angry, or very angry, meaning just angry, not suicidal necessarily.
I think that's what a lot of lay people like myself, though, consider mental health. It doesn't mean that they're diagnosed as this, that, and the other thing. It just means that they need some help in the mental health department.
Well, we all do. And so that's the thing. Like, we all need mental health help.
But we're not all about to go murder 50 people.
Yeah, but we all have issues that would benefit by talking with a professional. And we all have issues that would benefit from more self-awareness and emotional regulation. So to categorize these people as having some mental condition or candy apple or something, I think is philosophically dubious. It might be true. We don't have the technology to measure such things at this point. And there's some science that points in some directions, but I could give you the whole rundown. But generally speaking, the consensus is that there's nothing that we can say about the profile of someone that does this that demonstrates they have some different mental condition or some different mental structure. But we can point to things like indoctrination, like despair, like trauma. These things we can point to that cause a lot of problems, including these problems,
Right,
So,
but there's a vast population that are being indoctrinated. I mean, maybe not in the millions, but certainly 100,000 probably. And they don't all go and do these things,
True.
right? So there's some additional factors there.
Yeah, and there's also some randomness to it that when you have, say, in Buffalo or near Buffalo, you have, let's say, 1,000 people that fit the profile where they're in despair, they've been traumatized, they're isolated. That's often the case. They've been completely indoctrinated for whatever reason. Maybe they had some racist parents or they had a bad experience. And we'll get into more of this in another chapter about what factors lead to neo-Nazism and extreme behavior like this. But let's say you had like 1,000 individuals near this supermarket who were thinking about doing something like this. And what's the difference, and even that's a small group of people. It's not like we're talking a million people. We're talking about, a small group. And all of them were capable, maybe even had the body armor and the guns and a plan. What's the difference between those 99 and the one guy that actually did it? Well, it could be some randomness, like he just had a particularly bad week or he had nothing to do that day. I mean, literally things like, because the only analogy in behavior, which I think is analogous, is suicide attempts, in that there's a lot of people who think about suicide. There's a lot of people, there's a smaller group of people who will plan to attempt. There's an even smaller group of people who actually attempt suicide, and there's a smaller group of people who complete suicide. And there's a lot of those individuals, as opposed to these individuals, who there are very few of these individuals. The people who actually shoot up in the people who commit these kinds of hate crimes. But there's millions and millions of people, and we've been studying people with suicidal thoughts and behavior for many, many years. And in research and in interviews and in my own personal experience, there can be these very strange factors that can lead to someone attempting where, like I said, they have a day off where they're like, well, what do I do today? I don't, there's nothing distracting me, or I'm bored, or today would be kind of a good day. The sun is out, so I don't have to walk in the rain to get to the place where I want to attempt. I mean, literally, when you hear from people that attempt seriously and will survive and tell us why they chose that day, they will say sometimes like, I don't know, it just suddenly was overwhelming that day, and I just decided to do it. And so,
right, but
similarly with these shootings in Buffalo, similar to the shooting in Buffalo, the factors can be numerous that have nothing to do with one's neuronal structure.
I will have to disagree, because it was his brain ultimately, and he had been planning it, and he did go through with it. And so there was something out of the norm happening, and that I believe could have been benefited from if all the folks that cynically say it's not the guns, it's mental health, if all of them actually then back that up with like, therefore, we're going to increase taxes on the wealthier brackets and on corporations, and we're going to use that money to start a new mental health program throughout the country that's going to have hire a whole bunch of therapists and social workers and school counselors, and we're going to have regular meetings and do education stuff, I would applaud that. And I would still say, and we also got to get rid of the guns because it's still. So, yeah, that's my thing.
Well, I want to point out that literally nothing you said I disagree with.
I know. That's why I think that it's a red herring to say.
But you said we have to agree to
disagree. Well, because you said that there's nothing with his neuron. I'm like, no, it is his brain. It's just that it's not diagnosed. It's not in a DSM diagnosis. But
it'd be the same statement to say that you're wearing a purple shirt, therefore your brain is different because you chose a purple shirt.
Yeah, it is. I mean, well, it was configured in a way that made me choose this shirt today.
Okay. Well, if it's that broad, then yeah, I suppose.
Well, right. But then the consequences of my choice are not people dying, whereas the consequences of his choices are. So it doesn't matter. I mean, we can obviously.
But it's
somewhat semantic.
And there's literally nothing I disagree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And the solution is, I think, broader than just quote unquote mental health. And of course, I'd be all in support of increasing the tax allocation and raising of taxes to pay for these services, not just therapists, but as you say, social workers and other kinds of helpers, parenting experts.
Yeah.
Also, just economic help, which often does affect these things statistically. That occupational training, these kinds of things. So I'd be all for that, of course. But like with Sandy Hook, my conclusion on the individual who committed the horrendous crime of killing all those kids would have benefited from the family would have benefited, the mom, because it was a single mom and her child, and at least by the time this crime happened. I don't know if there are other siblings, but I've worked with families in this situation where because apparently he would just stay in his room all the time and play video games and would never leave and didn't seem like he was very happy. And the mom was trying different things, but it wasn't working. And I mean, was it the mom or the grandma that he was living with?
Grandma.
Okay. And
I don't know where the mom was, if she was around her, but I know it was his grandma was the person that he was
right.
with. And
Who he killed first.
Yeah.
And the father has been pretty involved with the media afterwards. Anyway, point is that I've worked with a lot of families like that, and if you just assigned a therapist, that might not help because you have to get the kid to go to therapy, you have to get the kid to participate in therapy.
Right, so the whole family has got to.
So what I was paid to do was I went to the home and I would sit outside the door of these secluded, isolated individuals and do everything I could. And I had to be experienced in that. And there's no training for that. It's not like in graduate school we took a class on how to conduct therapy through a door with a very unwilling person.
Yeah.
So I had to cobble together an approach and have support around that and the leeway to do it. The government actually would pay me to do that kind of work. Now, it wasn't identified that this person's going to be a shooter eventually, but I'm guessing today they would be identified that way, at least as a risk. Anyway, so that would have helped, but that's not like traditional therapy. Also, if there was help for the grandma and the other caregivers when the shooter was 5 years old, 3 years old, 7 years old, because there were issues then too, but it's hard to get that kind of concentrated help. Often they're just going to their physician, and their physician is just like, I don't know, try this medication or something.
And I think the reason in my mind why it's important to still have that conversation, because once again, the cynical claim by the right-wing folks that always opine after these things saying, oh, it's too soon to talk to politicize, but if we're going to talk, we should only talk about mental health. It's a cynical take because, first of all, they do nothing about mental health, period. Also, they ignore the obvious statistics, which are that this is the only country where these mass massacres happen constantly with guns, right? Like, it's just, so of course the first step, of course, has to be to deal with the guns. And it's a nearly intractable problem in this country because of the obsession with it. But then what I would contend is that even in Europe and other countries where they do have gun laws, there's still people that do go on these rampages, they stab people and stuff. So all those interventions with families and stuff would still be helpful and also would be helpful in this country. So I think that it's not an either or in my mind. It's like, yeah, we should do both and certainly start with the guns.
Yeah, in terms of risk benefit, it's worth a shot.
Yeah.
Excuse the pun. Let's watch more of this video from Vice that talks about the great replacement theory, which I will say I kind of knew, but didn't really know until I did this deep dive. Did you?
Yes, because a lot of the channels I listen to talk about it, denouncing it, not proponing stuff.
Before his attack, the Buffalo shooter released a manifesto on Discord, largely centered around a conspiracy theory known as the Great Replacement. a fantasist notion that there's a shadowy plot to replace white people in Europe and the US with non-white immigrants.
Forced mass immigration, population replacement, diversity quotas, and lies about white privilege and how only white people can be racist.
Obvious truths about the ongoing program of genocide against my race.
Predictably, the people supposedly running this plot are the Jews.
Jews will not replace us!
So they're showing that clip we watched in a previous chapter of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where they're saying Jews will not replace us, which also, before this deep dive, I would have maybe taken a guess as to what they meant by that, but there's an elaborate philosophy and conspiracy theory and whole system of nonsense that is present here. So what is your understanding of the Great Replacement Theory?
Well, like with all of these things, it starts with a sliver of facts and then co-opted. So what are some of the facts? It is a fact that in Western industrialized countries, birth rates overall are lower nowadays than they used to be, and certainly compared to developing nations.
It's even broader than that. Countries economically that are doing well across the globe, regardless of...
Well, and that's because more recently, other parts of the world have been doing better economically.
Yeah. But Japan has one of the lowest and has always had one of the lowest, and that's not in the Western world. So
sure, that's absolutely true. Like it's correlated with the wealth. It's just that the Western world has been most of the wealth. Most of the rest of the world isn't wealthy, and therefore they have had higher birth rates, and they still do. And so cause and causation, or correlation and causation are two different things, but those get thrown out the window. And essentially, folks look at it and like, okay, let's do the math. In this country, the percentage of white population is decreasing as a percentage of total population. And we're seeing more and more immigration from other countries that are not white, and those countries are having more and more kids. So it does seem like the percentage of white people is going down. Okay. Then you add the conspiracies, like, oh, why is this happening? It must be purposeful. It must be because they hate us. They hate the white people and they're trying to replace us. Who is they? Someone's doing this. Someone powerful enough. Jews are powerful. They run the world. They must be doing it. Why are they doing it? Well, they're doing it because they want to have global domination, and it's easier for them to enslave the lower class races than it is to enslave the white people. So they must, and these things get tacked on to each other, and then they get amalgamated with other conspiracy theories, and so then it becomes that this worldwide cabal, and they use the word on purpose, this worldwide cabal is purposely trying to exterminate the white race.
Yeah, I remember learning about this trend when I was young, maybe a teenager, and being kind of happy about it in a way, because growing up, I was one of the only mixed race, as they call us, kids in my community and even in the country at large. There's an increasing number of what we would call mixed race kids and people. But when I was growing up, it was rare. And there were a shit ton of white people in my community and in the United States. And, white people were the people who rounded up my family and put us in prisons in World War II. White people were the people who discriminated against us and me and would ask me, where are you from? And would attack my family and would bully my dad in school and call him names. Not that I had a problem in general with white people, but I had a feeling of like, well, with more diversity and a balancing of the scales, it might be better for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true necessarily, because it's not like non-white people can't be evil. That's ridiculous. Right. But it was a thought I had.
But the racism part is deflated a little bit if you don't look so different from each other.
Yeah, and just more people like me. I would meet half black kids and feel like we had a kinship.
Yeah. Because
we were just mixed.
Yeah.
And when you're alone and you're looking for other people like yourself, it feels good to meet other people like yourself. And so when I went to Hawaii for the first time when I was, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 years old or something, for the very first time in my life, I felt like I fit in. It was the weirdest thing, because 95% of people in Hawaii are mixed Asian or Hapa,
Right.
And they looked like me and talked like me and ate the same food as me. Like a lot of Japanese American culture, food-wise and otherwise, is very similar to just general Hawaiian culture, because there were a lot of Japanese Americans on Hawaii, particularly in the beginning, proportionally. And so when I heard about the stat of, you see the trend lines of more brown people and more mixed people and fewer white people. Like for myself, since it was all white people, generally speaking, around me, I tended to date white people.
Yeah.
And so I thought, it's just a matter of who's around you. My dad, being Japanese American in Spokane with mostly white people, he fell in love with a white person because, it's what's in front of you.
Around you, yeah,
yeah.
Of course.
And so it stood to reason that over time in diverse multicultural society that we aspire to be in the United States, as we always have, that there would be, eventually everyone would be some version of mixed.
Right.
And I thought that would be a good thing. At least I would fit in that future. I'm a harbinger of things to come.
Yeah.
and there's jokes about how when you interbreed a dog species or a human family, you get the Habsburg chin and the blunted cognitive ability. Whereas if you breed diverse representatives from the gene pool, then you have more robust, because you get the immune system of both. You get the survivability of both. At least that's my understanding of how it generally works. I'm sure it doesn't always work out that way, but
at the very least, you're less likely to have the same recessive negative genes.
Yeah.
You might, but it's less likely.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would joke around with my purebred white friends that I was stronger and, more resilient because I'm a mixed person, and they were some sort of inbred, just race jokes when you're a kid. And so,
which are always fun.
Yeah, it's just always the best. And so I remember feeling like, yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
Not that I want to get rid of white people, but it's just a matter of time, especially when you just think of the whole world. Like 1,000 years from now, there's probably not going to be anyone that's purely white. There might not even be anyone who's quote unquote purely white right now.
I mean, it depends. Right? First of all, I'm mixed, and I'm mixed on the whole thing because I love the fact that the world looks different and unique in different places, and that it mixes as well. Like, right? I love the United Colors of Benetton. I love all of it, right? I also think that it's gonna be physiologically odd if people that live in the northern hemisphere, even people that started with dark skin that moved there and have children and mixture, that if over time they still don't tend towards lighter skin because of the mechanics of why they have lighter skin in the first place. And that people that live closer to warmer, hotter areas that get more sunlight wouldn't continue to have darker skin. Because I just don't think that just interbreeding alone is going to get rid of the physical realities of that, right?
Well, I would imagine that you'd have to have a population in a region of lots of sun or little sun for certain, I think it's what they would say is certain alleles or versions of DNA that will manifest in melanin amount in one's skin to be selected for over time. So, I imagine in the future that if we're still around, that mobility will be as such that, meaning moving around, that it will be an odd circumstance that will result in a certain group of people living in somewhere like Norway for 5,000 years, such that the light skin will start to select itself for that, or opposite. I imagine that in my world of the future, the Star Trek version of the future, people are moving around all over the place. Plus, there are medical interventions. All you have to do is take a vitamin D supplement and everything's fine. And there's sunscreen, you know what I mean? So I, as a mixed person, and you're a mixed person, you're part white Spanish and part native Colombian.
Yeah.
And
which
what
is
else?
also part Asian, basically.
And what else are you?
Oh, my full DNA thing?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm 2% Ashkenazi Jew. I've got East Asian. I've got African,
how much
Sub-Saharan
East Asian?
African. I don't know, like probably 5% or 2%, 3%. I don't know.
Meaning that one of your great-great-great...
No, meaning that the Native Americans have descendants.
Okay.
Yeah. Or our their ancestors are from Asia.
Right.
Sorry, the thing with remember the melanin develops on your skin with the stimulus from the sun. So yes, you're born with a certain amount already predisposed genetically, but if the sunlight doesn't hit it, you don't get. That's why you get tanned, right? That's why. And so, anyways, who knows? You're right. I'm probably wrong, and you bring up excellent points. But what I was trying to get at was that I don't need everyone to look identical in the world for me to be happy. Yeah. And yet, I do wonder if people weren't so dramatically different in some cases, visually, if that would reduce some of this nonsense. And it hopefully would.
Yeah, it might. I mean, it's interesting to think about this because, scientifically, and if things continue down this road, everyone will be some version of mid-brown, right? If we just average the skin tone and the other kinds of indicators of ethnicity, eye shape, there's, as an Asian, people will look at me sometimes and say, oh, your eyes look Asian, or they'll say your eyes don't look Asian enough, or whatever. There's a certain look, and that as those things average out, that not only will white people, quote unquote, white people never exist, but other sorts of groups that are distinct will also potentially not exist anymore. So what does that mean? Yeah, it could take literally like a million years, who knows? But, or at the very least, there'll be fewer of them,
So you're 100% correct to an end degree, because it's already happened, right? Like clearly the US is in fact one of the great examples of this, because when you look at a city like New York, you see all of the stuff, and you see a lot of people in the middle, and see people where you can't quite tell what they are, and that's great, right? But if you go to then you go to pocket areas, and then you still okay, well, that's fully white, or that's fully black, or that's fully Asian, or that's fully whatever. And that, that's going to last longer because it takes longer for those pockets to get great replaced.
Yeah.
But the difference, again, it's the thing we were talking about in the other episode. There's observing a fact, and then there's what's your agenda behind observing that fact.
Yeah. Yeah. And my agenda is at least in the short term, I want more people like me.
Yeah.
but
therefore you're controlling the world, and you're trying to, exterminate the white. No, that's the part that gets layered onto this. I
just want everyone to accept that I like Spam Musubi. I'm just looking for more justification for that.
Yeah.
By the way, we had a party, at the Christmas party that I have every year. Someone suggested that I make, because there's one thing that I make, and it's Spam Musubi. And someone suggested, maybe it was even Stacy, and I was like, I don't think regular people, non-Asians, because we have some Asian friends, but most of our friends are not Asian. There's, white people, black people, Hispanic people, but not a lot of Asians. And I was like, and the Asians that I do know, they're not Japanese. So, and even if they were Japanese, really the only people who like Spam Musubi, like the way it's like soul food to us, is Japanese Americans and Hawaiians by extension, because they're so influenced by that. And there's various reasons why Spam became a thing. One of the main reasons is that during World War II, because white people, FDR, locked us up into prisons, they had to feed us. And one of the ways that they fed us was
Spam.
Was army rations. Mm-hmm. And Spam was an army ration because it is in a tin can and it keeps.
Yeah.
And so the Japanese Americans, citizens, by the way, people born in this country, relatives of mine, had to make do with what they had. And so they're used to making sushi and other kind of rice things for meals. And so they're like, well, we don't have fish, so we'll go with the Spam. And so they just started making Spam hand rolls, or musubi, that eventually evolved into what we have today. And, Spam is disgusting. It's particularly in the past when it had that sort of gelatin stuff around it.
Wait, what do you mean? It doesn't now?
It doesn't now, no. It's completely...
What was the gelatin? With fat to preserve it, I guess?
I don't know. Maybe just part of the manufacturing process. Yeah. It also made it easier for it to come out of the can.
Right. So how is it now?
It's hard. You really have to...
Oh, so it's just it in the tin.
Yeah. You should. But, and I get it.
It's funny, I only remember, because probably have only had Spam when I was a kid, and I remember it with the fat.
Yeah, we had a lot of that gel stuff in. That was not very pleasant. But to me, it's a taste of home, a taste of family get-togethers. There were special events when Spam musubi was around, and I like it. Now, if it wasn't part of my family, if it was just like something that someone served to me, I'd be like, yeah, it's fine. But to me, it's anyway. So I was like, I'm not going to make it for my friends because they're going to think it's disgusting, and you don't make food for people, but at least not very often. But if you ever do, like at a party where it's buffet style, and your dish is the one thing that no one takes, you know what I mean? And you have that
I could see that
humiliating. And plus, just the amount of time.
Try the potato salad. No, I'm okay. I don't like. Well, this one's really good. Why do you have me? Why are you so invested in me tasting the potatoes?
Especially something like Spam musubi, because you can easily just grab it. You're not committing the way you would be to a potato salad. It's just like snack food. And I make them in the little bite sizes.
Yeah, it's small enough.
Normally a Spam musubi is a whole thing, but I make like 4 fourths, that you can just pop in your mouth. And so
they looked very good. I had the salmon musubi.
Right. So I made salmon ones as well, but the Spam ones actually raced off the plate as the salmon ones did. And
but faster than the salmon, because there was still salmon left after the Spam was gone.
Interesting. I didn't know that. And I made twice as much of the Spam ones. And so I was very surprised. I mean, I will say I make a very good version of it because I don't make the standard
Well, if it was
version.
anywhere like your salmon one, it must have been delicious because the salmon was great.
Yeah. I use special sauce and special furikake, and I use cream cheese, and I use a special kind of nori. But anyway, point is that it felt good, to have that acceptance. I'm 53 years old, and I still feel like an outsider in my own fucking town because it's not just this sort of stuff, but it's been my whole life. And so for me to have at least some more mixed people in the mix is enjoyable. To me, like I said earlier, I claim all mixed people. Like I claim you to some extent, you know what I mean? So for myself, it's just a win. But for other people, I could see it'd be like, my people, that have been on this planet for millennia, there won't be anyone that will look like me anymore. And I get it.
Well, look, act, have the same culture and customs. Listen, it is the reason it's so existential to them is because they look at it as like, remember the nostalgia thing? They're like, but I looked around, like my mom, my uncles, my cousins, we all look like us, and we all celebrate Christmas with specific kinds of Christian values. And we go to the same kind of church, and we have the same holidays and the same celebrations. We eat the same kind of foods. We talk the same way. We like the same kind of music. All of that is being challenged. That is not just the skin color. It is their identity, it's who they are, it's their whole history. And they feel like it's all being taken away.
Yeah. And
purposefully.
It's malevolent.
Malevolent.
And the only solution is to fight and exterminate and to segregate. I can actually, it's so weird how these deep dives and then talking about it with you causes me to make these very strange connections. So I have started to notice that even Japanese Americans, not mixed, but just Japanese Americans are on the way out because there was this initial wave of immigration from Japan to the United States in the late 19th, early 20th century. That the main bulk of Japanese Americans came over when my ancestors came over, which was around 1900. And there were Chinese people here because of work and the railroad and this kind of thing. But the Japanese wave was pretty sizable because of economic problems and famine and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then the Japanese economy started to do better through the 20th century, and there were fewer. There was less of a need for Japanese people to leave, and so there were far fewer immigrants from Japan. But there were a lot more Vietnamese people during the war and otherwise.
Asian areas.
And then Filipinos have been coming over for a long time because opportunities in the Philippines and political strife has been ongoing.
And now with the tech growth, at least in a lot of the areas like here, lots of Indian.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
Chinese too.
the category of Asian American used to, when I was a kid, people would assume you're either Japanese or you're Chinese.
Yeah.
And of course, Koreans were starting to come over as well in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Whereas today, if someone says they're Asian, Japanese would not be the assumption, and it shouldn't be, because there's not many of us proportionally. The assumption today in Seattle would be Filipino, Chinese, Korean. I guess that. And of course, there's Indonesians, and I don't want to leave anyone out.
Thailand,
Laotians, Hmong people, Thai people,
You're right.
Taiwanese
Like
people, Guabanians. And
the Japanese side is certainly not as prominent.
Right, because there's just fewer of us, and a lot of us have married white people or other ethnic groups, black people, Hispanic people. And so the descendants of those Japanese people are either half, quarter, or eighth.
Yeah.
And so my people, there's Japanese people, but that's very different from Japanese American people. And my people, Japanese American people, in 50 years, there might not be very many. In 100 years, there might not be hardly any of us. Now, there'll always be a trickle of immigration from Japan, but not like it was before.
Not a large community, for sure.
Yeah, we had a whole town in Seattle, Japantown,
right,
that was, destroyed by internment.
So you can look at that and be like, man, that's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Right?
But, and it does bum me out because the Japanese community was very close and it's very particular, and it's not anything like Chinese culture. Not like it's better. It's just a very different, culture. And of course, Japan has many cultures just even within its borders. And the Japanese community within Seattle is important. Wajimaya and Japantown and different parks are named after Japanese people. There's different festivals, the Obon Festival with the Obon. It's like summer June festival. It will be gone. And when I go to these events now, it's a lot of white people because, or half people, or quarter people, or spouses, or just other Seattleites who are interested. When I was a kid, it was all Japanese people. It's like it's losing its cohesion and its existence, and it does bum me out. But I'm not about to say to Japanese people, stop interbreeding with the dirty white people.
Well, and even worse, stop falling for the conspiracy of such and such cabals that are trying to get us Japanese Americans to disappear from the face of the, Yeah.
And some people might say, well, the difference is with white people, they have been taught that they're the best, that there's something special about them. Well, newsflash, Japanese are the same way.
Yeah.
Japanese people believe they are special and better than everyone else on the planet, particularly the other Asian
but that's
countries.
true with almost every community. And I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's true.
But it's particular to white people and Japanese people, hence World War II and the genocide that Germans and Japanese people committed upon all sorts of people.
Yeah, but
my people were in the States not doing those things. We were just being discriminated against.
I'm just telling you, I think there's just much more power there. But like, I grew up in a country that looks identical to the countries around it, and we believed we were superior to every country, and that as a people we are superior.
Oh.
And the other countries believe the same, let alone if you go to Argentina.
But I wonder how, I mean, you could tell me that Colombia has a particular vibe to it or something. Well, I guess, anyway, point is that, and yet there are only some countries that invaded and considered it their manifest destiny to rule the world.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk great replacement, what about the Native Americans in this country?
Yeah.
That were greatly replaced out of all their lands into little conclaves. And honestly, if it had been up to the white people in charge, it's an interesting thing because part of them didn't want to intermix, but a lot of them did intermix. And so, because remember the whole thing, like, hey, if you come to our country, you got to adapt to our culture. You hear that all the time. And I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with the benign version of that. Hey, if you're going to be here, you got to follow our rules. You got to, like, try to integrate. You know, but where it gets malignant is when it's like, I don't like you have your little community there. What is that? What is that? You're not speaking our language. What is that? What is that? Right?
Yeah.
But isn't it ironic? Like it's these knives that they have cut 6 ways because they're like, you can't have your own community. Bad. Stop speaking in that other language. Oh, stop mixing with us.
Yeah.
Like they want both.
Interesting. Right.
You can't have your own community, but you should be in your own community. Oh, but don't be in your own community and talk your own language.
Yeah.
But you should not mix with us.
Yeah.
But you should integrate.
Yeah.
Like what?
And we're immigrants as well because we came from Europe.
But no. We had a divine right to the land.
Yeah. Well, let's take a break. And when we get back, it'll just be for patrons. So if you want to listen to the rest of this, become a patron of the podcast. Also know that when you become a patron, you are literally making it possible for us to make episodes of any sorts, particularly these deep dives, because it takes a lot of time. Also know that a certain portion of your pledge goes to various charities that we support.
And scholarships.
And scholarships as well, and occasional art funds as well. So do that now. Otherwise, please take care of yourself. Join us next time when we continue talking about this. Take care of yourself because
you deserve it.